Yeah, you know public works. GCACH is exactly. I know.
Are you on the 5 o'clock flight?
Are you flying somewhere?
No, not until the 8th. Actually, in town.
Do you ever, not leave on the way, like, or not come in at
Oh,
night?
kind of unusual. I'm going over on a big flight. People usually get staying over. Look at all these papers.
I think it's okay, bringing out the child in all of us today.
Oh, it is.
It's good.
I loaded up on the small
Yeah.
players I can find.
Let's go ahead and get started.
Hi, Rhonda. How are you?
Nobody got your attention to these things. You
I know, we need to get
Oh.
Martina's driving in Tottenham.
This meeting to order, which is great to see. So welcome to the last meeting of 2018.
Yeah.
So first of all, cheers to everything that got done in 2018.
Yay!
And let us start with introductions and maybe real quickly one fun thing you have planned for the holidays. So Rhonda Hoff, Jack Von Neighborhood Health Services, chair the GCACH, and as you heard, I am leaving at 5 a.m. tomorrow morning to go to Kauai. The fun part is that I have to be up on that 5 a.m. flight, but the rest of it will be downhill from there. So Diane.
Hi, this is Diane from the Greater Columbia ACH, and I'm just spending it with my family.
Becky Combs from Greater Columbia, and thanks, just hanging out with my family.
Ruben Peralta with Greater Columbia, and fun, my older brother, and I might choke up. After he moved away, he's moved away for 40 plus years, my best friend ever, he's moving back.
Nice. Excellent.
Good reason to be choked
So
up.
I'm gonna have a lot of fun with him.
Oh, yes, give him that. Madeline Carlson with People for People representing transportation. And again, it's spending time with a little grandkid that I can't get enough of.
Nice. Nice.
Les Palmacher Education. This Christmas, my daughter and son decided they were going to have a family Christmas, so they're not coming up, and we decided we'd let them have a family Christmas, so we're not going down. It's actually, I think it's kind of a, things move that way eventually. You get a little more independent.
Don't tell my family that.
We were there at Thanksgiving. I'm going to be down in January, and we'll be there in February. And then, it's not like we don't see them a fair amount. So.
Get everything mailed out.
Yeah, it's all, my wife was just calling to make sure that they've gotten everything.
Okay. Cool. Good job, Les. So Les is growing up and,
Yeah.
no, I'm teasing. Sorry. Ronnie Batchelor. Now I am with Lord's Mental Health and Services, and my new job is the exciting part. So, and I represent the consumer. Let's get that in there. And so this job takes me more into the mental health consumers as well. Oh, I'm sorry. If you guys are not hearing me, let me loud my voice. So I'll be working with those more challenged mental health clients, and so it puts me in perspective there as well. So, and for Christmas, I'm working.
I'm Wes Lucky. I'm with the Greater Columbia, and I've got a root canal next Thursday.
We said something fun, Wes.
Work?
Enjoy it. Don't judge, Carol.
Okay.
Thanks.
Downhill from there.
I'll try to elevate it.
What did you say?
Did you see more from Little Shop of Horrors?
Oh.
Thanks, Martin.
I know, those guys.
So I'm Dan Ferguson, work at Yakima Valley College, the Allied Health Center of Excellence, and I represent workforce development. Actually, the holidays are going to be, so I just got to actually celebrate some time with family and friends and a lot of tennis, four times.
Great.
Carol.
I know, I need my heart.
4 times in Southern California last week, and then I'm kind of in this planning mode for the next six months, and then at the end of January I go to Japan, Taiwan for Chinese New Year, and that's when I'll be doing
Nice.
celebration.
Busy.
Sandra Flores from Yakima Valley Farm Workers Clinic, representing SQHCs. And aside from the usual spending time with family and celebrating the holidays, I'm actually taking my first ever staycation. So I'm gonna not go back after Christmas to work and just party through at home until New Year's, and then come home. So this will be different for me. Not go somewhere and actually just stay home for a week.
I'm Ashley Fernandez, Greater Columbia staff, and like Rhonda, I have an early AM flight tomorrow. I'm working on packing as little as possible. It mostly means that I'm packing for my kids and like one shirt. I'm going to Ponte Vedra, Florida, and Hilton Head to go visit grandparents, and have 2 different Christmases and celebrate with all the kids.
Carol Moser, Greater Columbia ACH, also known as Rudolph. And we picked reindeer names in our staff, so we all have pseudo names of reindeers. So I get the pleasure of having my kids come home for Christmas and inheriting my daughter's 2 full-grown Siamese cats.
For good or just for holidays?
Well, they say it's a transitional period just to see what happens.
Oh,
but
man, that doesn't sound good at all.
I had a kitty, a grand kitty mom now. I'm a grand kitty mom now.
Jenna Shelton, reindeer named Dancer. And for Christmas, I'll be going to Yakima and spending it with my husband's family and our new 5-month-old nephew. So I'm getting 2 reindeer.
Martin Sanchez with Greater Columbia ECH. For Christmas, I'll be spending it with my wife's family and my family, so we're going to split it the time. So I'll be eating a lot of food. So that's the summer plans, and my reindeer name is Comet.
So I'm Brian Gibbons. I am at Estrella Sunnyside Hospital. I represent providers, and for fun for Christmas, I have one of our kids came home, and we're going to send him to the Fiesta Bowl. He's got to play tuba in the Fiesta Bowl. So his team's in the Fiesta Bowl, so that's kind of cool. So mostly what that means is I don't have to fly him back to Orlando, which is expensive. I don't have to fly him to Phoenix, which is not expensive, and then he gets on the charter plane and flies back to Orlando. So it's gonna be like $2,000.
There you go.
Oh yeah, that's my fun thing. I got $2,000 for
He
Christmas.
does big money, doesn't he?
Before we go on, Barbara, just room at the table, please join us.
Okay, I just don't want to get people confused about my role.
Okay.
That's all right.
No one will be
confused.
confused. Don't confuse Barbara with her role.
Her role is
Don't
well.
confuse Barbara. Right.
Don't confuse Barbara.
No, I'm not confused.
All right. I'm Sierra Foster. I'm from Estrella Sunnyside Hospital as well, and I'll be traveling tomorrow as well, but taking a red eye, not an early flight, to Buffalo, where my family's from.
She has to come to work.
You mean boss.
I'm Lauren Johnson. I'm with Greater Columbia ACH, also known as Dasher, for December. My fun plans for the holidays are going over to Seattle for Christmas. So that's about it.
Is Winston going with you?
Yes. Yes. Yay. I recently got a puppy and it's a lot of work.
I'm Ruben Alvarado with City of Pasco, representing local government. And I'm also going to the west side. I'm going to Bainbridge Island. Our nearest distant family. We're just making it work, and we're not taking our puppy. We're gonna put her in a kennel here. I think she'll destroy our families.
I'm also worried about that.
Hello, everybody. Martin Valadez, past president, and I work here at Tri-Cities Community Health. And tomorrow afternoon, my family and I, my wife and son, are going down to LA, which is where my family and her family are. So it'll be nice getting to see my 6 brothers and their families.
Hermanos, yeah.
Barbara. Hi, I'm Barbara Mead, a guest with Lord. I'm not a guest with Lord, I'm a guest. I'm an employee of Lord. What am I doing? My husband and I will stay home, and hopefully, if the path is good, our son will come over from Seattle and spend some days.
Yay.
Great.
Okay, and on the phone, and I'll start with the names that I see, and then we'll go with those I don't. So Ed, can you speak?
Ed with Comprehensive Healthcare, representing behavioral health, and we're just actually going to have a quiet time at home.
Okay, Marissa?
Marissa Ingalls, Coordinated Care. I have a massage booked for after Christmas, so I'm really excited about that.
Ooh. Lots of
Very nice.
Samantha?
Samantha Fredericks from Quality Behavioral Health, and I will just be having a quiet Christmas at home.
Sam?
Sam Riddell with Greater Columbia ACH, and I'm planning on going back to East Tennessee to see my 6th great nephew that I haven't met yet, that was just recently born.
Nice.
And Brigida? How about Amelia?
Hi.
Sorry, I
Amelia
was talking
Diaz
on
from-
mute. Sorry about that.
Okay.
This is Brigetta from Community Health of Central Washington. I was on mute. I apologize. My family and I are meeting in LA and then driving up to Central California to go hiking and enjoy each other.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry, now go ahead, Amelia.
Hi, Amelia Davis from Coordinated Care as well, and I get to go down to the Alamo Bowl and cheer the Cougs on.
Okay. And are there callers on the phone that have not introduced themselves?
This is Caitlin Stafford with AmeriGroup Washington, and Christmas at home with lots of different families, but then we leave on the 27th for San Diego and to watch UW, who beat the Cougars, play in the Rose Bowl.
Yeah. Sorry, can you make sure that sounds like Caitlin? Was that correct?
Oh, okay.
Yes.
We think. Okay, thank you, Caitlin. Okay. And then after Caitlin was.
Patricia Whitefoot with the Yakima Nation Wellness Coalition.
Great, thank you, Patricia. And do you want to share your holiday plans?
Oh, I'm sorry. Be with my grandchildren.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hello,
Would that be Jorge?
that would be me, Rhonda. Jorge Rivera.
Good job.
Hello,
Welcome,
everybody.
Jorge. Go ahead, please.
I'm actually off starting today until January the 2nd at 8 o'clock when we will be getting ready for IMC craziness. And I will be spending this time with my family.
Thank you, Jorge.
Craziness.
Is there anyone else on the phone? Okay, sounds like we have everybody. All right, well, so let's start just by, again, as we always do, reminding everyone of our attestation of our conflict of interest policy and self-dealing transactions. Please refresh yourself with those policies. Take a glance at the agenda, and please let us know if you think you have any conflicts with any items on the agenda, either now or when we get to that item. So the first item then we have is the board minutes from the November the 15th meeting. The only item on the consent agenda. And if hopefully you've had a chance to review them, and I would entertain a motion to approve them.
I'll second.
So that was from Sandra and Ruben. Is there any discussion about the minutes from the last meeting? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Does anyone abstain? And the minutes are approved. Thank you. Okay, so ACH report and updates. Rudolph?
No. So I was looking for the IMC tracker. That would be Diane.
Well, we are moving right ahead, getting into the first of the year. There's most of the providers are ready. There's an agenda item that we'll discuss later on about some technical assistance for the providers for the first of the year and into June. So we'll talk about that when we get closer, when we get to that item. But right now they're all working on getting, doing testing, and they've all pretty much registered all their MPIs. And most of the contracts have been paid. There are going to be 5 more going to be paid here at the next payment cycle, which is on the 28th. So we will get the rest of those in. And then there will just be 2 that have not been paid. So I think that's where
Could
we're
you
at.
talk a little bit about the communications that have gone out to our consumers, Diane,
Sure.
and how that's going?
So we had a communications work group that had a bunch of different documents that were created to let them know that they're transitioning, and that their primary care and their behavioral health care will now be joined as under their MCO. So they've received a letter, they've received a couple other documents in the mail. They have until they can change their plan at any time. If they change before December 28th, it'll go into effect at January 1. And then after that, they can change plans if they so wish to. But and in those documents also, they just had talked about the 4 plans that are in the area, telling them that they have the option to change if they need to. But yeah, so and there haven't been too much questions, or I think the transition has been pretty smooth with that, at least from our communications work group. There didn't seem to be too much questions on that. And then our early warning systems work group will start in February. Right now, Healthcare Authority is collecting the baseline data for most of the indicators, and I'm collecting some data from the providers. And then starting in February, they will have, January, they'll have rapid calls. So the first 2 weeks of January, they'll have calls 3 days a week, just to address any kind of issues that come about right at the beginning of that IMC transition. And then in February, we'll have monthly webinars to discuss the indicators for the early warning. So that's everything for there.
Great, thank you.
I'd like to say something about Diane and her role. I don't know if we announced this here, but she is, her position within the ACH is transitioning. She'll continue to do some of the work around IMC. However, she was hired as our opioid resource network specialist. So Carol and I and the rest of us realized that there's a lot of work tied to that particular project area that differs from the other project areas, and we needed a specialist to focus on it. And Diane brings in a lot of great skills, capabilities, and experience with her IMC work. So we're excited about that happening.
This is Caitlin. Diane, I just wanted to give you a heads up that this request will be coming to you, but we have found in other regions it's very helpful to continue conversations with the providers. And so we were going to make a request to the ACHs that have been using, you know, somebody like you to coordinate providers to keep that going somewhat in January and February, at least the first 6 months.
Yeah, we're going to keep the provider readiness work group going. You know, and our provider readiness work group also, you know, kind of hopefully we can transition into the opiate because they you know, deal with substance use disorder. So, you know, they kind of go hand in hand. So we're just going to keep the provider readiness work group together for the probably first 6 months. We'll probably keep it every 2 weeks for the first 2 months, and then we'll just go monthly after that.
Thank you.
This is Jorge. If I can ask one question, follow up to Caitlin's question is, since there will be calls with the healthcare authority and providers starting January 2nd, is there anybody from the ACH that will be calling in for those calls?
Yes, I will be calling in.
Would that be you, Diane? Okay.
Yes. And then also the navigators can call in, and Sam as well, and Carol if they so wish. I put everybody on the list.
Okay, and my second question is for our behavioral health providers. I believe that Barbara is there and Ed. What, if I could ask, what's your general feeling about the process so far when it comes to credentialing and enabling all of your providers in the systems for all 4 MCOs? Do you guys think you will be ready by January 2nd?
Was that for me, Jorge? For Ed?
Yes.
Yes, mostly for Ed and Barbara.
I know that we're working on it right now. I'm not sure that it's completed. I think we're probably going to get there. But there's some concerns. I think like a lot of other folks, while the credentialing might be okay, I think there's still some provisioning on the payment side because we're still working to complete some the amendments to finalize those before the end of the year. So there's a little bit of anxiety, but we'll work through it.
Thank you. Same for Lourdes, Barbara?
All right, the truth is I really don't know enough about that to make a intelligent, informed comment. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm also hearing some internal grumblings in Molina that makes us think that we need to be very alert on making sure that because larger organizations on behavioral health this year, since everything is happening kind of a little later, and we're doing 5 at the same time, we all want to make sure that all the referrals are enabled and that we can continue to refer people. The reason why I'm mentioning craziness is that this time around, it will be 5 regions coming live at once. And I promise you there will be confusion in the members because they get letters from the state. No matter how hard we work at the communication levels, they get letters from different sources, and some of them don't read the letters they get. So there will be confusion on who's with whom. So that's why it's so important that people do attend. If I could call up all the behavioral health providers to really make it for those early in the morning and early in the year calls, because there will be, I'm projecting there will be a lot of cleanup to be done in the first weeks. It's many regions. It's hundreds of thousands of members this time around, and it's been a little difficult before with much less members and much less regions. So we just need to be alert, and that's just my comment.
Thank you, Jorge.
I appreciate you raising that, Jorge. That I know at least in one other, I apologize because I can't recall if it's with Molina or if it's with one of the other organizations, but one of the interim solutions may end up being signing a brief out-of-network agreement to allow the payments to go while they provision the billing side. So I know that we're trying to find some innovative solutions, and there's really quite a bit of dialogue, and we've actually found that the MCO is pretty easy to work with around it, but it's just the the looming deadline, I think, has everybody a little nervous.
Okay, good to know. Thanks, Ed.
Before we go on to the Elhead, I think the other just monkey wrench that goes in here is remembering that we have a couple 100,000 members being transitioned away from United Healthcare in the region.
Yes.
And so I think that is just another compounding factor. I know those of us that do contract with and have been contracting with United have been trying to be proactive with our patients, but there will be, as there typically is when this happens, quite a bit of confusion in the month of January because of that. So we've been sending letters, United has sent letters, and then the state is doing a transition as well. So I think we can all expect that January will be a really good month to take another vacation.
That's exactly right, Rhonda.
Rhonda, am I
I'm glad you
correct
mentioned
in that the state has done the reassignments and those rosters are available now?
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yep. So, but there will be a lot of crossover because things still happen during the month of December, is my point.
So what does that
Exactly,
mean?
and there will be I'm sorry.
If for a consumer that is on United, they are automatically switched to one of the other 4 plans. They can change to, if they decide that they don't want that one, they can change to whatever one they want.
Okay.
But they will automatically be assigned to one.
And it's happened. We already have cases at Trust Community Health where, and I'm sure you guys too, where the new MCO that they've been assigned to does not contract with the provider. So they have to move. So it's a lot of moving parts, and they've already been moved, and more to come in January.
It will mostly be sorted in January.
Yeah.
But as proactive as everybody's tried to be, it really gets untangled when the rubber hits the road, which is when the consumer goes to the provider that they want to go to, and then they have to find out. They have to make sure that the provider they want to go to is credentialed with that particular health plan, and if not, then hopefully the provider will help them switch, as opposed to telling them to go figure it out.
Yeah.
Is that, because that's going to be the difficult part,
Yeah.
because if they're denied service at somewhere where they've been going, it's going to be, and if the provider is not helping and assisting with that switch, a lot of those clients that are on that are going to find that very difficult and disheartening, and they'll stop going
So
to.
in most communities, there are navigators,
Right.
and that in community health centers all have them. And often most hospitals have them.
Right.
And some private offices actually will do that too. But if they don't, then the best hope is that they'll find one of the organizations that have navigators that will help them make that switch, because it can happen the same day.
Okay.
And we just sent a follow-up letter saying, you know, if you don't know, you should already, it's already, should have happened, but if it hasn't, let us know, or any questions, I suggest, because I oversee enrollment. So just to reassure them, because apparently, the other thing that's happening is that sometimes they will actually even switch their provider. So which is kind of a weird thing, because that shouldn't be happening, right?
Except for the plans, the new plans don't know who the provider was.
Right.
They don't have that information.
Right. So anyway, so there's a lot of things that's been done proactively, as you said, but, you know, so we are trying to help them as much as we can, because that's the question, particularly the more vulnerable.
Right.
Okay, so the elderly factors,
let's move it.
Right here. Good. So this is the Lynn tracker. The sections in green gives out the contract deliverables for the year for every local health improvement network. You see the dates there of completion. And the reason you see Kittitas County and Southeast Washington being a little different there is because they chose to break down the deliverables so they get paid in chunks throughout the year, and not wait till every deliverable is completed for them to get the total $30,000. So that's the difference there. And everyone has met all deliverables pretty much, except for one that is not due yet. You see the empty boxes there. That's the financial report deliverable, which is due January 31st. And that's pretty much the contract deliverable. And on the other side, on that each kind of color, that's the community health fund to address the social determinants of health tracker. And I'd like to give the Yakima County Healthcare Coalition a round of applause because they've completed the process. Actually, last Friday, on the 14th, Carol signed the third-party administrator contract. So here in the next couple of weeks, the foundation is going to be issuing the RFPs to find organizations that will be addressing the Yakima County Health Care Coalition's identified social determinants of health. So that's great. So as far as the rest, you can see there, capturing the consumer voice. Right now, Walla Walla is the only one who hasn't completed it. However, they are in the process. They have completed 25. They're aiming for 100. They're on their way to do that. They completed the GCACH report in October. And as far as selecting the social determinants of health priorities. I mean, I say that so many times, and I just stuck on it this time. There are several of them who have completed the survey, and they are in the process of selecting what their priorities are. Everyone has selected a third-party administrator. The ones who have selected their priorities are in the middle of working on the language as far as the scope and the description of the social determinants they want to address. And yeah, the last category, third-party administrator contract signed. Yakima is the only one that's there already. So again, congratulations. Any questions? 1, 2, 3, okay. Too late.
Thank you, Blitzen.
Yeah, that's me.
So in regards to the practice transformation status tracker, you can see it. We've done kickoff meetings with 22 out of the 23 organizations. For MHAPs and TCMHAs, we're moving right along. For the organizations that we have done those with, now we've started to do a little more virtual follow-up, so doing some phone calls, trying to save some miles on the cars, and that's been going really well. And I think Becky sent out some contracts this week, so those are getting read and reviewed, and I'm sure we'll have questions and be able to answer those. And hopefully those will get signed, and we can start moving along through the rest of this and meeting some milestones and deliverables. So we're chugging right along.
Yeah, we should add that we recognize that the contract is difficult to read, especially the project toolkit. So we're hosting a webinar on the 3rd during the time that we would normally be meeting for the practice transformation work group. We'll have that meeting during that time, and Becky will be explaining the contract deliverables, and we'll be able to take you to the milestones of the project toolkit. So there will be some kind of tutorial to assist all the providers along with understanding that.
Yeah, we just had our work with y'all the last couple of weeks. It was very, very good. I think we all learned something, right? So that was good. No, it was good. That's good.
Yeah.
That's very,
they
very
get
helpful.
conversations going for one. You know, you guys, we sit down and go over the PCMH assessments, and that's when kind of, having all the departments there, clinical, IT, from different sectors coming together and kind of focusing just on that kind of gets your brain going like, hey, this is a good idea.
Right.
Why aren't we doing this? Or we might be doing it, but some other person didn't know. Like, hey,
Yeah, it was an excellent exercise, and I appreciate the work that you guys do. It's really very, very good. Thank you.
That would be Vixen.
Do you have a cheat sheet over there with all of our names, Carol?
You're embedded in my brain.
Okay, so the portal, as you guys know, has been down, so this really didn't change from last time, except for we did get, Lords into the registered in the portal twice, actually. Twice, yes.
So nice to meet you twice, huh?
Yes, yes. Well, they changed their names, so we had to re-register them. So that's nothing that's really changed on here, but like Diane mentioned, the portal is open again, and the next payment will be on the following Friday, so the 28th.
In the upgrade on the portal, do you know if they were able to address the issue of retired officers? For example, we had Rick retire, but they were previously they were unable to change it, the point of contact from him, so he continues to get communications intended for Jody Daly, our current CEO. Do you know if that was addressed in this upgrade?
Yeah, if you send me an email, I can get that changed for you.
It has to be done on the back end.
Yeah, GCG has to do that. I can't do it. We can't do it. So
Becky.
if you can send Becky, me, an email.
Becky, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We're doing the same thing, right?
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, we're in the process of changing.
Yeah, we failed. Our contact is must be just 2 seconds that it takes to do that.
She must have a very demanding boss.
Yeah. So we're gonna flip ours and we'll get our stuff squared up. Thank you.
Okay. So on to action items. So we're going to talk about financial reports.
Okay, financial report. So we're going to run through this kind of the same way that we did last time. We're just going to focus on the budget versus actual roll-up that Lauren's got up on the screen. The detailed expense reports and balance sheets are included in the packet if you want to read them at your leisure. So on the budget versus actual sheet, we had our finance committee meeting with Brian last week, and we walked through these, and I'll let him speak to that, but he approved them and said everything looks nice.
And these are through November, is that correct?
Yes, just the budget versus actuals was through November. Okay. So we had no changes in our revenues. And the expenditures, we had $211,000 for our payroll, which is pretty normal. There wasn't anything in here that's any different or new, Brian, unless you have something.
No, there wasn't anything. I think and again, you did a fine job going through all the materials. I've got no concerns. We went through in detail a little bit through each of the components. I think we looked at the dollars coming in, and we reiterated that we wanted to speak to pursuing better returns.
Yes.
You know, kind of creating a new more, shall we say, perhaps a little bit more aggressive pursuit of interest and opportunities there. We were going to work with our Moss Adams or one of the financial planners to help us with that in the upcoming year. We went in detail through each of the expenses that the agency has been through this month. Everything looks appropriate. There were no concerns. You guys did a fine job explaining everything. We had no issues. So I was very, very comfortable with this. I would make a recommendation to make a motion to accept these as they're written, unless there are any questions.
Thank you, Brian.
Second? I'll second. I have a question. This is actually, it's not about the financials themselves. It's just kind of my once a year clarification reminder, because I lose it once a year. Remind us on the distinction between the SIM funding and the district. One's more flexible than the other. Just give us an annual reminder of that.
So the SIM funding was the original funding that we got to start this whole process. And the SIM funds are over as of 2018. So we will no longer have access to any state innovation model funding. So that's what SIM stands for. So those were funds that were injected through the healthcare authority that have more federal streams attached to them. But that ends, and we will no longer be getting SIM funds because there's none more. The district funds are the funds that are generated through the intergovernmental transfers and then the state match through designated state health programs. So those are what are actually funding all of our project areas. So we rely on the district funds to help supplant our design funds because we need to cover the cost of the staff to help deliver their projects. And that's what we will be talking about later when we talk about our budget, is that we will be pretty much relying on our district funding for staff salaries next year.
Right.
Thank you.
So I do have one more
Put that on the agenda for next year at this time.
So I do have one more question. The SIM funding, was that one lump sum and it went into our bank account, or was that kept in their funding list, like you had an account with them and you took those funds out?
So the
as
SIM
needed?
funding did come to the Greater Columbia ACH. That's correct, Ronnie, whereas the district funds are held in the financial executive.
Okay, that, yeah, okay.
You're exactly right on
Because
that.
I was trying to figure out which one was which, and I knew one of them stayed in and one of them was deposited.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure which one that was.
Right.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And are there any abstentions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian and Vicki. Okay, so the design budget?
Okay, so the design budget actually took on a new form this week. Carol and I sat down and talked about it a little bit, and she decided that she kind of wanted to see, so what you guys just saw on the budget versus actuals roll up, you can, when you look at that, you can see all of our funding areas, like we just talked about. The SIM is also in there. And so what we did is we changed the design budget to an operations budget, and we took in the actuals column, that's the actual expenses that came from all of our funding areas. So you can see a more accurate list of what we spent on. So if you look in the middle part, Lauren, can you scroll up just a little bit?
Scroll up.
Down,
Yeah.
sorry.
Scroll.
Just scroll. There you go. I wanted you guys to see off to the side, there's a little box there that says expense budget for 2018. So that shows you that how much money for our salaries that came out of district, how much came out of design, and how much came out of the SIM. So it kind of breaks it down, I think, a little bit better. So you can see what budgets all of our expenses came out of. So instead of just the design budget, we changed it to an operations budget. Are there any questions about that?
So just to clarify, you basically saying this budget looks at what your expenses are, not the source of the funds that come in.
Right.
But you still have accounting sheets that look at all the source
Yeah.
stuff. And, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Just makes it easier to read. Right?
Oh, good.
Yeah, actually a lot easier.
Good. I'm glad.
And then secondly is because since there really is going to be one source of funding next year, as opposed to just design money, we're calling it operations money, so that we can account for all the operations that happen within the Greater Columbia ACH. And I just think it's easier, for me at least, to track how much we're actually spending, as opposed to having 3 or 4 different budgets that we have to keep, flipping back and forth through.
Yeah, I agree. This is much, much easier, much more consolidated. Good.
Good. So we're going to take them through the proposed 2019 budget.
Yes. So we have a column on here for the proposed 2019 budget for our operations.
I thought you were changing on me.
No, we're not changing.
Because I saw 2018 and I was
So the
like,
first column is 2019, our proposed 2019 budget, and then there's the 2018 actual and the 2018 budget. Those are the three columns on there. So in our budget for 2019, if you look down at the bottom of the grand totals, you can see that there's a very large difference between what we've budgeted and what we did for our actuals for 2018. And these actuals, Brian, are actually through Monday. So there's a little bit of December in there too. So it's pretty,
There's a bit of a difference.
yeah, it's pretty close to end of the year. There'll be another payroll out of there, but, so, and as Carol mentioned, our salaries for 2019, we're going to take out district funding. So that's the 1.4 million that you see there, which I guess I should report on also has gone up because we hired a new finance and contract coordinator, starts on January 2nd. Her name is Rachel. So that's exciting.
She's excited.
She's like, I can't help. I can't help. So, Carol, did you want to talk about anything else on here?
Well, I think we should just go through the use categories. So at the very top, you'll see that we're going to rely again on some of our contracted personnel to help us deliver these programs, such as Eastern Washington, OHSU, SKCPH is Seattle King County Public Health, and they're going to be helping us with some data analysis that we're getting from the state. Then we have the convenings, mileage, education and training, marketing, and the 6 local health improvement networks in the next use category. Again, we're proposing to fund the LINs at, again, another $30,000 for each LIN. We're proposing for some sponsorship. That was supposed to be, I think that this is in the wrong column because we're asking for $30,000 for sponsorships. And then we want to roll up all of our mileage expenses into one category. They were being taken out of the design budget, the district budget, the SIM budget, and so we're rolling them all under one category in the use category. The next category is obviously the largest because we've got all of the staff salaries in there that we're proposing to take out of the district funding. So that's really the biggest bulk of the expenses for 2019. The next row down talks a little bit about the internal IT support that we're getting currently from Community Action Connections. We've got Sergio on hand that gives us a lot of technical assistance. We just migrated to the OneDrive so that we can share documents with each other. It was getting out of control in terms of trying to handle all the different versions of the documents that we're all working on. So he was helping us migrate through that. And then the next category, we'll be talking a little bit more about the workforce and the mental health internships or some kind of funding for scholarships. We had a meeting with the workforce group, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, so we're proposing to fund some internships, whether that comes out of district or that comes out of our operations budget is a decision for the board. The practice transformation work group also voted to approve hiring a vendor to help us get these learning collaboratives up and started. Then below that, we have some opportunities for grants next year, especially with the Premier folks. So we put in some money for a grant writer. So the total proposed budget for 2019 is $2.7 million, potentially with close to $2 million of that coming out of the district fund.
And Carol, the other revenue that will offset that is from
our design fund.
Okay. Thank you.
So you said you had taken the travel or put it in one place, but I see travel in 3 places.
I think it's showing just for the current year.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is you're seeing the budgeted dollars from existing.
Right, so
And
there
so
was.
they do drop from all these different accounts. Well, they've got in the budget year, there's probably only one
Right.
One line, right?
Yeah.
No, I still got two of them though. Convening mileage, 30,000, travel ACH, 20,000, two different
The
places.
convening, that's for,
So there's no
trading.
dollars for 2019 in the
Right.
convening in the first column.
Why am I seeing
Because we had,
30,000?
Right here.
In your second box.
Second box, top line.
Yeah.
so that is travel for, that's part of Ruben's budget for engagement.
Mhm.
That's his, the travel for, when he does his engagement.
I
Meetings.
just heard
It's
you
not-
you would put all the
So
travel together. and then I
What she
saw that
meant
you
by
said-
that was travel for the employees
Uh-huh.
when we travel, and so we put all of that under the administration column, which is the third one.
Yeah, that's, I mean, I recognize that, but when I saw that, it seemed like,
I
that was
think
my question, is like.
It's probably, just I think probably the word travel we should take out of that one, Carol.
Yeah.
That's not travel in respect to what she was
I
talking
understand what you're saying. I see it too. You're right.
about. Do you understand? Okay. Does that
Yeah,
make
we
sense?
should just eliminate the word travel.
We'll do that.
Yeah, it's for his, like, meetings and stuff for him, for the.
That's for his
His
outreach.
engagement, yeah. Thank you, that's
That's what she's.
For the link.
Yeah.
right.
I think my question is, didn't somewhere along the way we decide that grant writing wasn't an allowable expense?
That money was,
Yeah, not with STEM, but we can use money that we have earned through our district fund. We can use that in any way. There are no restrictions on that. So when we've sent out the grant contract, or we've sent out the contract, there's a statement that says these are not federal funds.
Okay.
So that frees us up to be able to use these funds because they're earned.
All right.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions about the new operations budget?
Is Dan back?
There.
Did you want to talk a little bit about the scholarship/internship discussion that we had at the workforce committee? And Madeline, you were part of that conversation too.
So, my recollection was that, we're trying to determine kind of the best use of funds that can be targeted towards kind of the highest need area. There's been some really good conversation, discussion around where we might target, support for example, internships, where, individuals would not normally receive traditional forms of support. So we would identify internships that are not usually paid for or supported. And we've had a lot of good feedback from some faculty or administrators from Columbia Basin College who kind of took more of a, I guess, what I would just call workforce development lens to helping us think about directing our efforts. So Mary Horner and Susan Campbell, who are part of the Leadership Council, I know that Susan has been, and have helped us kind of think about directing how we might create scholarships for individuals who are in specific organizations that have the highest level of need. And so it would be really our organization that would prioritize that, and then we would create a system of application. That's kind of where we were at.
And so we're meeting tomorrow. We know that the professions, especially in behavioral health, they're very short. They're very difficult to come by. And a lot of businesses can't afford to bring on interns because it costs them a lot of money. So one of the ideas is if we can grow our own behavioral health through these internships, and they are more likely to stay in the areas where they've received their internship. So I went online and I just did some research about the cost of internships in different fields, and it was Lori Brown that brought up the fact at our last meeting is, well, what about licensed social workers? What about some of these other fields? So I did a little bit of research, and I think that this would be a great program to incent and allow some of our providers to have funding to bring in internships so that these people could stay and learn and grow in those fields and perhaps stay. So that's kind of the philosophy, I think, with medical residencies nowadays, is that you try to grow your own. They're more likely to stay. And then through the workforce group that now I'm a part of, there was a report that was put out on behavioral health. And this is one of the big areas I think that the state legislature is going to be tackling this year, is looking at how can we bring in more behavioral health workers. There's definitely a shortage. And so this idea of scholarshiping and paying for interns was also a part of the behavioral health task force recommendation. So I think we're just right in line with some of the things that they're thinking at the state level. But if we wait for the state to give us the money, it might be another couple of years. So we're trying to be proactive and seeing what we can do to help increase our capacity for our own providers.
Carol, I would say that I did just recently attend a legislative meeting with some of the key legislators who were addressing or tackling this issue and are really wanting to bring this to the forefront. And they're going to be looking at the recommendations from the behavioral health workforce assessment and somehow incentivizing behavioral health organizations to supervise and then to provide support for that supervision, and to, again, to incentivize kind of local hire or, local training, local hire kind of thing. If anything that we can do to encourage that kind of regional pathway that supports our workforce right here. So there is a lot of interest. And so I think Carol's doing a good job of framing this. This is really aligning with state effort, both from the Health Workforce Council as well as interest of the state legislature. We're kind of ahead of the game, to be honest with you.
So what your sponsorship, I've read the document, I guess from the backside, is to provide support, financial support to the organization for the supervision, not to the intern.
Right. So we flipped from scholarships to kind of this idea of internships, and we haven't finalized that yet, but I would say that there was the thing with the scholarships is that that scholarship could go to somebody that in behavioral health, but then they could go anywhere, right? So that just because they go to Eastern Washington and get their education doesn't necessarily secure that they would stay even in Washington State. So then we started thinking about, well, what about internships? Because people are more likely to stay once they have had an internship at a particular organization. So I don't think we have totally, figured out or if we would want to split the money yet, but I know that this is just one of the ideas that came out that made a lot of sense, especially if we're trying to keep people, in our community. So it was just an idea.
So I guess what I'm saying.
No,
Okay.
So,
So when I'm thinking of these things, are we talking about from what you were saying? It sounds like I have a provider organization. I would apply so that I could offer internships, or I'm going to graduate and I would apply because I want to intern in this area. I mean, how do you?
It would be with the organization.
So the organization would apply to us. We would help them figure it out, and then then people would apply directly to that organization.
And what Mary Horner and Susan are actually recommending is that that the community college could also play a role, as they have students that are going through their programs and they're trying to place them, is that they would help us work with those provider organizations if they needed some assistance in precepting this particular individual. And Susan and Mary also recommended that we work with all of the LINs locally to figure out, so what in your region do you really need? Do you need community health workers? Do you need behavioral health specialists? Do you need licensed social workers? Because it's going to be the LINs that have the most local knowledge of the kinds of gaps that they're seeing in their workforce capacity. So, but again, we're a little bit ahead because we haven't had our workforce meeting, which is tomorrow, but we kind of needed to know, if we're on the right path in terms of the funding, because the board is looking at the funding. So that's why you guys are getting that before our next workforce meeting.
And I think it makes a lot of sense to do something like this versus the scholarships that we were talking about last month. I think this makes this looks like one that will really help our own communities grow.
So this is for individuals who are still students that will be interning.
Or finishing up their schooling, and then there's a required internship.
Right. So like, I think master social workers need so much of, yeah.
For mental health therapists, I mean, MHCs, you know, or MHPs in our state. But I think Mary and Susan really made a good point in terms of when you're looking at the higher end professions. And I know Ron and I have had this conversation around primary care. You know, so no, I mean it's kind of
everywhere primary care provider.
So typically, and I think this is one of the things that the workforce committee is going to be kind of grappling with. We could go along with the kind of the train and figure out how to support more primary care providers, where there's probably a whole host of other workforce positions that really need this benefit and support because they don't have kind of the resources as the higher end professions. So, you know, medical assistants who need special behavioral health training, or community health workers, or, you know, we could come up with a list. And again, the LHIN could have a say in this.
Well, and I mean, I liked your idea. I'm glad I was thinking about it the wrong way, frankly, because what I was going through my head was we have interns at our organization, and we have different scenarios. We have social work interns that require, I mean, it's like 3,000 hours.
Yeah.
It's a lot of hours, and it's a certain number of hour supervision time that does cost a significant amount of dollars, and so we typically don't have more than one at a time. And the flip side of that is that we also have psychology interns. Our psychology interns, we actually pay them. So I was thinking that this was money that this bucket would pay them instead of us pay them.
Well, you
But
could use it that way.
We're also supervising them too. So I was thinking this is money they would apply for, but I liked your plan better. So I support what you're thinking.
I think it could be either way, Rhonda. I think if, let's say, your organization wanted to sponsor a behavioral health therapist and you applied and you got some funding, you could use it to pay that intern, or you could use it to absorb the cost of precepting an individual. So we'll have to write the policy with enough latitude and flexibility so it really benefits our provider organization.
Yeah, and also there's another aspect, you know, because sometimes we have staff that, you know, it takes away from their work, right? So sometimes we have to provide them, particularly like on the provider side, you know, a little bit extra to help, you know, PAs, whatever, receptor incentives. I mean, that's another angle that they should have in there, right?
And this is, so those of us who are on the behavioral health workforce task force for this assessment that now the legislators, now they're really, so this came out like 18 months ago. Now the legislators are really paying attention to this. And one of the key pieces of this was, how do we incentivize community-based organizations, behavioral health, primary care organizations, to supervise and to precept and want to do that? And because honestly, you know, there's students out there that end up in internships, and I'm not going to call out any particular profession, but they're not always wanted, or they're kind of seen as a drag.
It's a burden.
It's a burden. So how do we?
Because you can't serve as many, like, right?
Yeah.
Well, you can't serve as many
general,
patients.
In general, it goes one through two ways. You're either the burden student, you're the student that's a burden, or you're the student that's breathing fresh air into a work team.
Yeah.
And so there's not really an in-between.
So what we're trying to look at is that domino effect that happens, you know, because then there's potentially quick burnout because they don't have a satisfactory experience in the local region. And so we're trying to address that by incentivizing the organization to do it.
So in terms of looking, you know, community by community and where the greatest need is, doesn't the Sentinel network data provide that?
Yeah.
So, I mean, to be able to look at it an objective view of where,
Right.
what to put the dollars in.
Right, and and Patrick is being humble, but Patrick put together a regional survey 2 years ago, and we used the data from his survey and the data from the Sentinel Network, and that's where we really landed on this behavioral health and mental health counselors, because that, in our region, that was our biggest need. And so that's where I think Lori's idea of, well, what about behavioral health in terms of the scholarship idea kind of morphed into this internship idea.
Well, and I guess my question is does either of those sources allow you to drill down further? This region is big. So, I mean, is there any discrepancy across the region? Would it be different in
Well, so the idea is that each one of those LINs would take the information from the Greater Columbia ACH and vet that information for their particular area.
Okay.
I mean, that's probably, I mean, you can get it down to the county.
I was just going to say, the state does county level opens, and we can get that data pretty easily.
And so what I would recommend is that each LIN take at least 1 or 2 meetings and go through the data and have a conversation based on the data. What is it that's really going to be the most important for our particular area to advocate for?
This is Marissa. I just want to make the point that it sounds to me like there's some really great ideas here in terms of how you get more different types of providers into the region, and so that's great. But I'm concerned that there are narrow or like very specific rules basically around degree programs, and you need to make sure that any internships or whatever this money ends up funding is in line with the accreditation requirements. And so I would encourage the Workforce Board to reach out to the State Board for Community and Technical Colleges or the Council of Presidents, which is the umbrella group for all of the state universities, to talk to them about just general best practices for how you open up more slots. They're also going to give you, or should be able to give you, direct contacts for programs like UW's School of Social Work or Eastern's or WSU's programs that, may be the ones that you want to work with. So I do see this going in a really interesting direction, but I also don't want to discount that students have immediate financial needs that can always be, or often are, barriers to degree completion. So please don't completely rule out some sort of, direct student funding just yet.
Okay, thank you. So can we go back to the budget? Are there other, back to the budget? Are there other comments or questions regarding the fiscal year 19 operational budget? Are we ready to approve the budget or some other motion?
I would like to advance a motion to approve budget.
Second by Les. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Is anyone opposed?
I take away my eyes because I can't vote.
Any abstention? All right, 2019 budget is approved. Yay!
Rudolph is so happy.
Your nose is shiny.
Okay, so the next budget is the district budget, which we, Carol gave a definition of already. It's our project areas. The categories, the first column is the categories, and those are established by the Healthcare Authority, so we can't really change those. But what we did do is the column that says example budget items. We we broke those out a little bit to further explain what those categories are covering and what the money is going to be used for, in that project area. So the first one is our project engagement, and you can see that we broke it out to, there's money for the QI teams, PCMH, MEHAF, base population funds, practice transformation work group membership, and that's all for the PCMH contracts that I'm working on getting out. And same for the rest, all the categories in that column, the milestones, 1A, milestone 5, milestone 5.3, those are all for the practice transformation agreement that we're working on. So that's our big project area this year, I think. Pretty exciting. The next one is the health systems and capacity. And this, again, our big project area is the practice transformation agreement. And so there's money in there for the specific milestones that are in the contract, which you guys have all seen that contract. There's a category in there for workforce training, which is also part of that contract. And then the only thing that's in that block that's not part of that contract, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is the HIT and HIE. The 500,000 is not separate, Wes. That's your area.
I'm looking where it is.
Your health commons, your data motion, direct messaging. So those are contracts that we're going to have with those specific providers to provide services, which is Wes's kind of wheelhouse. You want to talk about that one? I have to put you on the spot.
Well, for next year, as you know, we're about to finish up the health commons work in Kittitas. They're moving from the demonstration platform to the operations platform, and they may already be there. That work has gone very successfully, and we hope to grow that into 2 to 3 additional areas in 2019. What we're trying to do is overlap the health commons work with the work that Diane's doing around the opioid resource networks, which were called out in our project plan proposal, and they're also mentioned in our implementation plan for opioid. So there's that money. There's also another chunk of money that, I'm trying to think of what it is. There's an additional $50,000, I thought. It doesn't come to mind.
I'm not sure.
So one thing we've talked about, we had a DMHE committee, data management and HIE committee meeting with in the last couple of weeks. One thing that we've talked about as a group has been to try to integrate the prescription monitoring database into electronic health records. And that's going to be a lot of work. So what we're thinking about is true for 2019 to at least try to pilot that in one organization to see if we can do full integration with the EHR and see how that goes. And if it's successful, scale it up from there. It's a requirement of the practice transformation contracts that the providers go to that database, but there's no requirement that it links into the EHR. So we're trying to facilitate that in some sort of integrative way.
This, it's hard to read, but this still says Pathways Hub operation. Did you intend for that?
Where do you see that, Rhonda?
It's
It's the column C.
So the descriptions are given to us by the Healthcare Authority. They have a description for the use categories, and so we grab those descriptions from Healthcare Authority, but that doesn't mean that we're doing pathways, but that's where they would take the funding from.
This is just the prescribed form, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why we made that column with the example budget items. It kind of breaks it out to what we're actually doing, not what all the ACHs and the Healthcare Authority.
Okay, right.
So next column is the integration incentive, and we have 6.1 million for the behavioral health integration. And Carol, do you want to talk about the question mark?
Yeah, I do. So we should be getting, this will be the second half of the IMC money that should be coming around May. The board might recall that last year we asked the behavioral health provider group to make some recommendations on how to use the IMC money. And so we gave them that latitude. This year we have the $6.1 million, and I would encourage the board to to think about how we can use that money. You know, also having maybe a little bit more active conversation with the provider organizations on how to use that funding. I know, for example, in North Sound, the board of directors has made all of the decision about their IMC funding. But I think as we're looking forward, I'm just offering up some ideas, and so I have some question marks around using some of this funding to integrate with primary care, SUD, and mental health, or maybe some more technical assistance from consultants. And again, going back to those internships and community health worker development, is it possible to carve out that $500,000 from the design budget and put some of that from the district budget? So,
now that you've completed the MEHAP with most all of the organizations, is there anything to be learned from the MEHAP on collectively? Are there areas that could be advanced?
I would say, and Martine jump in here too, empanelment. I know we had that discussion at the board level, I think last board meeting, just understanding what that can mean for behavioral health providers. Definitely some training could be useful. I know that's kind of getting addressed with technical assistance potentially, but put me on the spot, right? I'm sorry.
Just because we just did ours this morning. I'm still kind of recovering from it, so I'm just wondering if you looked at all of them, if there might be some ideas that you can glean out of that collectively.
I think a lot of them want to integrate. So that's one of the biggest things with the MEHAP, that they're not there yet, but they want to be there. So that could be, like Carol said, something that we could focus on, the integration between SUD, mental health, and adding the primary care or the med management in there.
And are the needs, are the needs any different or unique between mental health providers and substance use providers?
They're different, but they both SUD providers and the mental health providers want to integrate. Either way.
I would say the same thing. Collaboration is needed, especially with the standalone SUDs, and trying to figure out what that looks like and how it can be done, and reimbursement, all that stuff.
Now, how much is primary care involved with this conversation? I mean, because I hear a lot about mental health and SUD, but I'm not hearing a lot about primary care.
Or the places that have it like integrated, already, they're in that loop because we do the MEHAP and the PCMHA together with that team, so they get all of that, and they get to speak to the primary care side and the mental health side. For those who are standalone, that's where we have to really know our area and know our region and say, you should maybe collaborate with so-and-so and potentially look at doing some integration with them and sharing a staff member. Things like that have been happening as we've been meeting with people. So.
And IT has somewhat of a role in integration through the direct secure messaging, which we're making available to all of our practice transformation providers. In fact, not everybody, but most everybody who submitted a letter of interest might be eligible to receive direct secure messaging technology. They will have to create a contract with the vendor we've selected, which will help facilitate, but they'll have to hold the contract, which we will pay for through the demonstration project. But it just provides, a HIPAA compliant, safe way to exchange information between providers if we can't achieve exact co-location.
There's a lot of natural partnerships that are developed, are developing, just by a lot of say, oh, you should work with this and this will work for you, and just knowing who wants. By doing those assessments, we know who wants to collaborate and where they want to work together. So by bringing them together, by doing those assessments for primary care, they do them for primary care, and they also do them for the BHAP, for the behavioral health. Kind of know who they want to partner. So it kind of like is hooking them up with each other so that they can collaborate.
And pointing to something you said, Rhonda, about the learnings from the PCMH and the MEHAP, something that Carol and I have talked about, in terms of learning collaboratives and learnings for 2019. we would really like to spend some time either at the Leadership Council or perhaps another venue that has a lot of time to go over the core concepts of PCMH in terms of the implementation guide. The Safety Net Medical Home has the implementation guides around those core areas like care coordination, quality improvement, empanelment. Those are really important concepts. Some organizations do it really well. Other organizations are farther up on the learning curve. So if we can create a learning environment and a learning venue to facilitate each of those core areas, we think that would work for everybody's needs. And we might look to exemplar organizations to help with the training for those areas.
So I don't know if this is related or if you have this embedded someplace else, but there was a conversation about our decision at the last board meeting.
It's coming.
It's coming?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's keep going.
I want to go back for a second to actually shared domain investment. Sorry about that, but we kind of skipped over that.
Okay.
Oh,
So these are pass-through funds.
Yeah.
They're not ours.
They don't exist.
They come to us for approval and we send them approval and then they go out to the public hospital districts and the public entities that are IDG.
Oh, and is that the work group that Ben
Yeah.
Google's involved with?
AWP.
It's part of the matching process.
Jorge, could you mute your phone, please? Thank you.
Thanks, Carol.
You're welcome.
Okay. So, the next column is the project incentive. What
The
the
community
intent
health fund,
is,
I think it's the
Community health fund?
The community health fund.
oh, did I skip one? Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. It's okay. Community health fund. So the community health fund is,
Ruben Barrett?
sorry, yeah,
It's Ruben.
this is Ruben's budget.
Mhm.
You want to talk about that?
Ruben has a budget.
Ruben has a
Watch
budget.
out.
Ruben
Well,
has a budget.
that's the money that we're allocating to the local health improvement networks for them to address the social determinants of health. The process I described earlier, which Yakima is ahead of the game.
Come on.
So that's budget, and also a portion of that is to put together a campaign to address adverse childhood experiences, which are also social determinants of health.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that later.
Yes, another item.
Yeah. So we won't spend a lot of time on that because we've already talked about it. So the next category is project incentives. And again, this is all for our practice transformation agreement, lays out the individual milestones in the contract and what, how much money is allocated to those areas. The next block is project management, which we talked about a little bit from the operational budget. We're going to pay for salaries from project management and administration. So the project management positions are laid out on here at Sam, Jenna, Martine, and Diane, and so it lists their salaries and then the taxes and benefits for them. And then the next one's the administration, which is the remainder of the staff, Lauren Carroll, Wes, Becky, Ruben, Rachel.
Say a reindeer name.
No, yes.
Ashley and Kylie.
And Ashley and Kylie.
So that would be Rudolph.
I don't know what they are. Rudolph, Dasher, Dixon. I don't know. Carol knows all those better than I do. So the total district budget for 2019 is 24 million.
So there's a placeholder there in project management that says transitional care PM. That's potentially for the hire of a project manager in that area if we go that direction.
So I can tell you where to spend the last part of that if you want.
Oh, yeah?
Uh-huh. Here support at the hospital's emergency room.
Okay, thank you for that. Seriously.
So what I wanted to show the board in the very small letters at the bottom of that 2019 column, we have in our portal as of today $27,548,875. So if we were to obligate every single one of these dollars tomorrow, we could pay for it. So we're not obligating anything that's not already in our bank account. Now, we will be getting more money after the second SAR, SAR 2 for 2018, which is due at the end of January, and we're anticipating around $10 million. So when we get that funding, whatever that funding is, then the board can make some more decisions on how you want to use that. We're anticipating, however, having a second round of applications for PCMH mid-year in 2019, and we'll need to use some funding for that. But I didn't want to obligate any money that's not already in our bank, and just to assure the board of directors that we still have a little bit more money left over, about, what is it, $450,000, if we were to obligate all of this money tomorrow. We know that that's not likely to happen because these payments are made in quarterly after the PCMH organizations reach their milestones, but we're not spending money that we don't have.
Even if the government.
Oh, my goodness.
Well,
Let's not go
we
there.
already have the money. We already
That's
got it.
true. That's true. We have the money. It's in our
And that
portal.
$450,000 left over, she can make payroll.
Thank you, Brian.
Okay. Are there any other clarifications you want to make, or any other questions from the board?
Again, just to let the board know that these milestones that are in your milestones and contracts, what is it called? The milestones in your contract, these line up to all of those milestones. And so you can see where we're funding out of district these use categories as dictated by the healthcare authority. So you'll see a lot of it is in health systems and community capacity building. You'll see a lot of it still in project engagement, some for social determinants in the community health fund, and then some to incent providers really to get to those value-based payment contracts. So we're trying to be really transparent in the way that we're using this money, and it has all lined up with the revenue sharing model, which is all lined up with the change concept, which is, lined up with PCMH. So we think that it's a pretty good model and very transparent and justifiable.
Well, and you've done more than that. You did a ton of work on this last year to get it all linked up, as I recall. So I think it's very good.
Is that a motion, Brian?
Yes, please. I make a motion that we approve the district budget as presented.
Second.
By Dan. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Is there any abstention? Okay. 2019 district budget.
Do you know Dasher and Dancer?
That's really good. I know you guys did a ton of work.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And I completely missed the next slide, the IMC provider representation.
Okay, so the last board meeting, we talked about the contingency fund, and the board approved that we would distribute the contingency funds according to the formula that was already used. Well, the provider group had a meeting the same day that we had our board meeting, and they agreed upon a consultant. So our meetings crossed, and so that there was a little bit of misunderstanding between. So there's two provider groups. There's the provider readiness work group that we are chartered through Healthcare Authority to manage, and then the providers have a group that they have together so that they can talk amongst themselves without having the MCOs and Healthcare Authority there. And this was the group that had originally came up with the funding formula. That's a little bit of background. So in the meantime, so we've had this confusion between which group should be the one to make the decision. They had their provider group, and they had 60% agreed to have Jet Computers be a consultant or technical assistant for the first part of the year. they thought that they would best use a consultant for the first 3 months of the year rather than getting ready, because they thought that they are pretty much ready. They just don't know what they don't know. And so they thought that a consultant could help them with the issues of denials, rejections, any other technical issues that they would need coming up into the next year. Which I agree. I think that is a really good idea to have a consultant. I have no problem with that. It was just how it crossed. There was no communication with us. We didn't know that they were meeting and that they were discussing this. And so that became a problem. So we brought it to the work group, the readiness work group, and it was split.
Just to be clear, the provider readiness work group is the group that works under the umbrella of the ACH.
Yes. Correct. And that group was split. Half of them wanted the contingency money and half of them wanted the technical assistance consultant. So we went ahead and decided, we created an RFP and sent it out to 3 different consultant groups. We sent it to Jet Computers, XBIO, and NetSmart. NetSmart did not respond, and they did not get it to me in time. But XBIO and Jet Computers did. And Jet Computers came back with a way better rate. They've worked with most of the providers, and so the providers feel more comfortable with them already being in their systems. So the assessment time and getting up to speed would be a little bit faster than hiring somebody that hasn't been in their system. So anyway, so the amount of the incentive funds was $4,073,056. Well, their funding formula, if you look on the back, they used only $4 million for their funding formula. So there is a balance of $73,566. And so we were going to have to add that into the contingency fund anyways. So what I think we should do is use that $73,000 and use that for technical assistance and as a contract not to exceed the amount. Because I spoke with Jet Computers and they feel that they could get it done and with around about 20 hours per entity. And so we would just be paying time and cost for them. And then it would make it would make the people who wanted the contingency fund happy and the people who wanted the technical assistance happy, because now they all get both.
And it would make us happy because then the providers are getting
Yes.
2 technical assistants during a very critical time in their startup period with the managed care.
So wait, let's back up for a minute. So the first thing we need to decide is that the board wants to change the decision
Yes.
the board made last month. So remind us, the board decided last month.
So the board decided last month to go ahead and allocate the contingency fund based on the original funding formula, minus there was a base amount that was given to each organization.
So each of these organizations was going to get some additional money.
Yeah.
Right.
So the first question is based on, we have a renegade group and we have an official charter group.
Yes.
So this is what I heard you say in a nutshell. The renegade group made a decision they wanted to do something else with the money and told you. The charter group had a split decision.
Correct.
There's also a third issue here, and I had emailed this after our last meeting, and that is that the contracts we all signed are not silent on this point. There's an article in the contract that specifies a deadline for when the funding must be used, or that it would go out by formula. So, and I think we can entertain decisions to do other things, but if we do something contrary to the contract, we create a breach unless we offer a single-page amendment to all the people who have agreement.
There will be an amendment to the contract to include that and also to include the new funding.
So what happens if people who have signed agreements decide not to entertain the amendment?
Very hardball. We live by the old contract.
Yeah.
What did you say, Brad?
Well, if they don't,
We live by the old contract.
right, if
They
they don't sign the
advance
amendment to change it, then they're abiding by the original agreement.
which unfortunately binds everybody to distribution by formula. Again, my point is I'm really encouraging staff to review the article of the agreement to make sure that a decision doesn't create a breach of agreement.
Understood, thank you.
So, just a quick comment. So the board made a vote, and then right after that, there was a meeting, and we found out that there wasn't. But cancer groups that still want a consultant, couldn't they, we're giving them additional funds that weren't in the contract. Couldn't they pool a portion of those funds together, and those who wish to hire the consultant could each pay for their 20 hours under a group bargain agreement?
Yeah, we could do that.
Versus having to redo work.
Well, the issue too is that 73,000 wasn't even part of the original formula. And that's what I'm proposing, is we use that 73,000 for the technical assistance.
We're not there yet.
Okay.
So, other comments about what we do with the decision from last?
Make it simple. Don't get it complicated.
So what does that mean to you, Ronnie?
So to me, it just means that we haven't enacted anything as far as what we've done on that last vote, right?
Right.
No, nothing has been, so it would null and void that if we agreed with this, but there's this little simple issue over here. What's that contract look like, right? And if we're reading that contract, and this money isn't included in that contract, and we haven't done anything on that last piece, right?
Yeah.
Then we're clear for everything except for.
I agree. Okay, so let's say we keep what the board said, distribute the 471,000. This is what's in the contingency fund right now. It's 471,866. So let's keep that. That's the amount. Let's split that by formula, which we'll have to get the formula because it's so complicated. I tried to figure out what the formula was. I'll have to get that from the group that provided it to us. And then we can still, so that's the amount that we agreed last month to split between the providers.
And that's what their current contract.
And that's what their current contract has in it. So it's consistent. Then we use the rest of the money that was not included for the technical assistance.
Brian?
I would propose that we make the decision the way we made the decision on purpose.
Yeah.
And that it is the right manner. I would stand by the decision we made last month. Sorry that one of the groups doesn't like it.
Hear from some other board members. Did you have something?
And I just think one of the issues I have with what came about in the provider group meeting is there was a statement made that everyone agreed, but they didn't have everyone agreeing because they didn't have a formal roll call or voting process that said everyone agreed, because I know for a fact my organization wasn't even on the call.
There were, yeah, they said they were not invited, but they were.
Yeah, so it's just kind of like there's a little shroud of mystery on that end as well.
There were 10 providers that went to that meeting, but all 17 providers were invited to the meeting.
I mean, part of the intent was of the vote was that this should make everyone happy because everyone would get additional funds to do the additional things that they needed.
I do.
Ruben or Dan, you haven't spoken on this issue. Do you have an opinion?
I don't think I'm still trying to wrap my head around that one.
It's confusing.
Any of the board members on the phone?
Again, I think if we let the signed agreements be our guiding documents, then we don't really have to worry. If we decide to do something different, there's still another layer of negotiation that needs to occur. But I think we can do either one. But I'm trying to find the actual language to make sure that it really is a hurdle. And if I find that, I'll come off mute again and read the language so everybody can see it.
Okay.
This is Caitlin. I think that if there weren't all BH providers that were represented at the meeting, that we should probably just stick with what we did last month. Just, you don't want to accidentally hurt somebody who wasn't allowed to be or couldn't participate or couldn't be there. Everybody's stretched really thin right now, so it makes more sense if they want to pool money and get the consultant on their own, they could.
Okay. Did I hear an
No, I'm just saying that if our vote last time was consistent with the contract, then it almost was no need to vote because it was already in contract. I mean, I don't see a problem with it.
Okay.
If there was something that's variant from what that contract was, then that's what I think would need to be addressed. And that's the part that I don't understand right now because I don't know if there's a conflict between the two.
Madeline, do you have an opinion?
And I'm just saying that as far as, being consistent with the contract moving forward, and it sounds like our motion was in conflict with the current contract. And I don't think we were aware of that when we voted last time.
Okay, so what's the pleasure of the board?
Do something until we know what the conflict is.
So we make no changes at this point?
I'm just asking.
Their contract ends as of December 31st. So that's why we were kind of pushing it for this month to try to get a decision.
What we don't know, Diane, have we checked to see in the contract language, and Ed, maybe you can help us out. Does the contract language talk about the 4 million, or does it talk about 4,073,000? So the contract itself is based on a $4 million amount. So by
the contract, the article itself references a reserve fund, so whatever is held in reserve, which I would assume would include any additional funds. But I can't seem to find again, I'm still looking, but I'd like to be able to offer everybody the actual language.
I think I can get it on my email.
Okay, so while we're doing that, I think the other issue I think that we have is, and I guess we just need an affirmation, and that we have two groups. We have a group that we're relying on as an advisory group to this board, and that's the Provider Readiness Work Group, who we've chartered really to be the advisory for the VHO provider group, and we need to, I don't know what the right word is, but somehow acknowledge that that's the group that we go to for our recommendations, as opposed to another group that meets for their own purposes, that has been providing recommendations, but they should join the Provider Readiness Work Group if they have ideas and recommendations. And so we should somehow get that message to them, that if they have ideas, they should be joining the Provider Readiness Work Group. Can we make that happen?
Yeah, sure.
I think that staff has been just trying to be respectful of all the provider groups, and there's different people that are represented on each one. And the Healthcare Authority had wanted us to reach out and take into consideration their opinions, and so that's what we've been trying to do. It's just that when it got to this contingency fund, it was very confusing because we were hearing from two different groups.
Understood. No, I understand that. And some of those people overlap too, don't they?
Some of them do, yes.
But I think it would be helpful, and as an invitation to say this, to acknowledge that this is a group that we are taking our recommendations from, and so we would encourage them to also, not to end themselves, but to also participate in this group.
They all are participating. Most of them are all in the Provider Readiness Group already. It was just that they had one individual from each entity supposedly on this other committee. And that's what, and then there were miscommunications. I didn't get the message that the meeting was, and so yeah, it just became too cumbersome for us to keep track if we're not part of that group. We have no idea what's being talked about. And so then when they bring recommendations to us, I think that we should stick with the one that we're chartered with.
So while you're looking for that, I guess, would an option be to stand with the 4 million, distribute the funds as we had approved last month with the formula driven. If the contract allows, then you could add in the additional dollars, 73,000 or whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
If the contract doesn't allow it, should we carry these over as reserve funds, contingency funds into next year with a different contract for them? Is that an option?
Yeah, Becky's saying yes.
Yeah, I don't see why not.
Yeah, the current contract would end,
Yes.
and then yes, we'd have to do a different agreement for next year.
So that might be a solution then.
Okay. And we did discuss at the last meeting, didn't we, that there will be another
Round of money.
portion of money coming that the board would have to make some decisions about how to allocate.
It's just that it doesn't come until May, Sandra, and so that there wouldn't be any opportunity to jointly get technical assistance for the providers.
Okay. I wasn't sure the
So
timing.
is the board comfortable going forward with that as the plan B? If the contract doesn't allow that to automatically add in as an amendment?
I would be, yes.
I think what it does is it says, yes, we're going to really understand the language of the agreements we have and see what obligations are already tied to it, and then what is not obligated can be used next year to create new contracts. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
that's what it is. Yeah.
I
Can you
just
guys
wish
work
that we
with that?
would have known about the technical assistance before we made the vote, because I really think they need it. But
Well, they should have, but they still have that option.
Yeah,
as
we still
they-
have the option.
Do we need a motion to do this since we're really voting to
Do nothing.
reaffirm?
Right.
so I think we need for the provider ready, just to make sure that the provider readiness that we are going to hear from. I think that's the only other thing, and that you're going to stay with the vote that was originally.
Okay, would someone like to make a motion?
What are we what are you moving?
Well,
It's in the recommendations, in the S bar, if you look at the very last piece, it's,
Where?
that the provider readiness work group makes the recommendations to GCACH regarding funding and technical assistance decisions.
So we're not making that recommendation.
Just the last part of the sentence.
Just the last part of it.
The rest of them are not going with.
I just wonder if we need to, if that's how we've been operating, do we need to have a formal motion for it?
Yes, I would appreciate having that being able to communicate to the other behavioral health provider group that the board of directors is saying that the staff needs to be working with the provider readiness work group.
I need to decide if I have a conflict of interest on that, but.
Okay, well, Sandra's worried that might be a conflict, so would somebody else like to make a motion?
I have a question. I don't know if it's appropriate to ask.
You could ask a question.
Okay, so my question is, suddenly I got confused. Is the $471,866 going to be distributed according to formula?
Yes.
Or is it going to be distributed, split equally between 17 providers?
Formula.
Okay, thank you.
That was our previous,
Yes.
that's what we voted on
Yes.
last time.
Yes.
Right.
So then I would like to make a motion, because I'm very positive based on past precedents that it should not be an issue, that the GCACH Board of Directors adopt the Provider Readiness Group as the recommendation-making body for the GCACH Board of Directors. That makes sense, everyone?
Yeah. I think
Second by Madeline. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Who seconded? Oh, Madeline.
Madeline?
Thank you.
Is there anyone opposed? Are there any abstentions?
This is Ed. I think I need to abstain from this one as well.
All right, thank you, Ed. Okay. The sponsorship policy.
Does that give Carol what she needs?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. Thank you very much.
That's it, then. That's the last of it.
That's it.
You don't get anything
No
else.
more.
Rest of the year.
No more singing, no more Rudolph outbursts.
I'm looking at that motion, I have to make sure.
Who's talking about the sponsorship policy?
Madeline, do you wanna?
I think together we can.
Okay.
So the communications committee committee met and reviewed the original sponsorship request form and looked at developing some clarity around specifically what we felt the purpose should be, and then developed a policy and kind of the procedures that we thought that needed to be in place. And from that, actually the 30,000 that was in the budget would be used for individuals to be, or organizations that are planning an event to be able to request the sponsorship. And so we wanted to make sure that it aligned with our core project areas, so that information was included. We wanted to also have an opportunity to make sure that there was some equity geographically with these funds, and the original sponsorship actually had a max amount of 10,000, and we all agreed that was probably too much for us to it would probably go through very quickly. So through that, Lauren did a great job capturing this, and we met twice, and it went very quickly. So, Lauren?
Some other things to highlight. We decided we want to focus on singular events instead of programs. We don't want to put all our eggs in one basket, so to speak. We want to try and spread the love, spread the money as much as we can, which is how we arrived upon the geographic equity. And then, so the staff actually recommended geographic equity as being a part of this policy, which we then took to the communications committee, and they decided that we should have an application window. So that window will be split into quarters. And so through that, we'll be able to look at all of the requests that we received that quarter and make sure to accomplish geographic equity. So I'm trying to think what else we added. We added several questions. We suggested that each applicant submits a budget, so we have an idea how they're spending that money. We also wanted to emphasize that we aren't wishing to sponsor an entire event. We're wishing to sponsor a portion of the event, and that we also added branding is required using our logo. So I think that's about it. I want to thank the communications committee. We met twice to discuss this, so thank you everyone for your time.
So I'm reading this, and it says your application window is the first month of each quarter. So that the application window for quarter 2 is January. The application window for, and only, and so if it's February 5, they're beyond that. And is that how I'm reading it?
So Kylie,
I couldn't really identify the end. I could, I wanted to make sure that that's what it meant.
So Kylie actually put this together. I think the reason she did that is she wanted to give applicants a window to apply, but also give us enough time to review them, so we aren't reviewing a bunch of applications at one time and then going right into the next quarter. I'm assuming is what she meant by that, but if that's something we want to change, we can definitely do that.
I just want to really understand it. I'm not sure that I understand it. So I'm just saying, applications open January 1, close January 31st for the quarter that's April, May, June.
January, no.
For events that are happening April, May, June.
For events that, or
January,
or later. So I can see that it says the first of the quarter, but I can't see that it's only that month.
Specifically, the dates, the time it opens, the time it closes.
So if it's only that month, or does it mean all of that until the end of March, which I doubt it could mean that because you wouldn't have any time to review
They
it.
were going to review them in a timely manner, but when would they be eligible to get the funding? That is really what. So would they not be eligible, if they apply in quarter 1, would they not be eligible to have their funds in place until the start of quarter 2?
That's a good question.
We do have no.
And is it also for that quarter, right? So if you apply in January, or The first quarter or for the second quarter?
The way it reads right now, I think
First quarter.
it's saying if you apply in the first quarter, you can have the money in the second quarter, and you're supposed to apply a quarter in advance.
Or
If
more.
it's that confusing, it needs to be rewritten.
Yeah.
So a little chart with, you know, what the
Explaining.
deadline
Okay.
for the applications for the quarters that they're wanting their money distributed. Because that's the part that matters, I think, the more. I mean, what happens if I decide I'm 6 months ahead and I can get this great application in and get it off my plate? How's that going to be a burden to our organization, knowing that I'm applying for something in 6 months, not in 3 months? I think the deadlines are more important.
Well, for me, it's like rolling admissions, right? The earlier you apply, the better, because you're not gonna wait to compare all 50 at once. If you apply January 1st and you all, if you think it's a worthy one, you're just gonna do it. So it's incumbent upon
So
them to
when
do
it,
whatever
when it's gonna have,
Right.
when it would pay out as well. So
Mm-hmm.
the time that the application process opens and closes, and then when they can expect payment delivered.
I think we can create a little table
Yeah,
that
table.
explains this
Well.
more clearly.
And I
That's a
think,
good idea.
you know,
Yeah.
because we realize that when an event is occurring, that sometimes those requests come in, and we had talked about doing like even semi-monthly review of that. And then when we were talking about the equity, then we looked at, well, all of Yakima County could have events going on in the first 3 months, and all of the funds get requested from Yakima. And so we wanted some way to allow kind of that, right, and more opportunities for other regions maybe to be able to apply. So that was why we landed on the quarters, but I do agree that not being so stringent on a close date, but just recognizing that perhaps within that quarter, we set aside a certain amount of funds, and then if those funds aren't used in that quarter, they could roll over into the next. But I think that was the overall intent, was just trying to break it out by quarter and not necessarily be restrictive on the date you put your application in.
The
So yes,
conversation,
you could put it in 8 months in advance.
yeah, the conversation in committee was that what would help us manage equity as well, so that way, if we were reviewing a stack of applications, we would be able to better equitably distribute the funds across the region versus having them come in at odd times
Yeah,
and getting.
I think
The heavy
it's worked really
exposure.
hard to make this sort of really address the whole region and have a thoughtful way of applying, so that you have an idea of how it will make the effects that they're applying for. So, you know,
Yeah, nice job.
very nice job.
Who's going to be doing the ongoing review?
Yeah.
That's the communication.
GCACH staff.
Ruben.
I noticed everyone was looking at me.
Ruben.
Yeah.
You're not gonna be in the office that day.
Well, no, I'm
This was our email number one.
pretty sure there's gonna be a couple of us.
Yes, it's a policy. And we'll fix it though. The motion should probably include the clarification of the deadline.
Just one more question. So how will individuals, entities become aware of this opportunity?
So we were thinking of possibly going through the lens and letting the lens know that the funding is available, and then from there, they can present that in there.
Yeah, we get plenty of people asking already.
Yeah,
Sure.
we already have.
And we discussed some ways to make sure that, for our future work of what we'd like to do as far as marketing and using our website and et cetera. We have some future plans.
If you'd like to join us, everyone's welcome.
The communications committee.
I'm already
Yeah.
on that committee.
I know.
You know,
That's true, Dan.
Yeah, really. Thanks.
Okay, So you're going to make a table or somehow try to make the timeline a little bit clearer. The only adjustment I've heard. Someone like to make a motion to adopt this policy with the little clarification?
We can bring it back,
Unless
you want to approve it now.
I think it's, I think we could go ahead and approve it with, changes, regarding the one section on timing, to clarify that that is an open window throughout, and that, individuals or organizations can apply for those funds, but they would be distributed on a quarterly basis.
Is that a motion?
And
That is,
one
That
more
was a
question.
motion.
It is a motion, but I want to make sure that it clarifies that who can receive the funds? Is it a nonprofit that can receive the funds? Is it a group? Oh, okay, I missed it then, I'm sorry. I apologize.
So no, that's, but we'll have that and then call for the question.
So I have a motion by Madeline.
I'll take it.
And a second by Sandra. And now open it up for discussion.
And then, so eligible applicants, as long as they're putting on an event that would benefit GCACH and address one of those core project areas, they would be eligible to request the sponsorship. So whether it's a for-profit or a nonprofit entity that is hosting an opioid awareness, community event, that type of thing, they would be able to request sponsorship.
And I'm sorry if I missed it, Madeline, did you say that these are not already receiving, organizations not already receiving dollars from Greater Columbia ACH?
Right. Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Sorry. I spread the lie.
Right. Clarification.
We already told you.
Yeah. Okay, if not, all in favor?
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Are there any abstentions?
I'm going to abstain because I have no idea what you voted on.
Okay. Thank you for your honesty. So let's talk about the ACES campaign. We have 27 minutes left.
Okay, I'll hurry. Well, the good thing is that most of you are familiar with about 2.5 pages of the SBAR here, but I'll summarize it and I'll speed things up a little bit. So we're all pretty much familiar with what the Adverse Childhood Adverse Experiences Study results in those 17,000 participants. And as you may already know, those 17,000 participants had some improvements in their health measures simply by going through the process of the study, learning about it and answering the questions and going back to their doctors. They discovered that there was some improvements in their health measures, and so in a way to kind of get some of that as well, we're hoping that an awareness campaign with the general public, making the public aware of the first childhood experiences effects, as well as the importance of resiliency plays in overcoming those ACEs, that kind of awareness campaign can maybe help us help our communities get some of those improvements as well. Maybe not to the extent of those study participants, because they became very, very familiar with what all that entails. So, and hopefully this can bring some interest among the different communities into them investing more into programs that help deal with resiliency. So in the background area, we spoke a little bit earlier about social determinants of health, and which ACEs are just 10 of. The reason why the researchers that came up with the 10 ACEs is because they happen to be the 10 most common that they were discovering among those study participants. So that's why there's a mention here of social determinants of health, which, as you can see on the second page, 80% of our health is determined by social determinants. And there are, a couple categories there of social determinants. That table there from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, those are our 9 counties, and their measures on the social determinants of health. The red is pretty much, it means that in that box, that county is worse off than the state average. The green, it means that that county in that particular box, that particular measure, that county is better off than the state average. And then on the third page, that's just the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which that's what we're trying to address by doing something about social determinants and ACEs, because they pretty much fall under the basic needs rungs of the hierarchy. That's pretty much what we're going after. So under the pyramid, that's pretty much what this campaign would entail. It would run over our 9 counties plus the Yakima Nation. It will be in multiple languages in platforms like radio, television, print, and social media. We would host 3 high-profile speakers, experts on ACEs, and speakers that have inspiring lived experiences of resiliency to speak to the crowds in 2 venues within that region. Okay, and the crowd, we're hoping to pretty much the majority being Medicaid consumers, and bringing in also professionals and community members who are key to the success of the campaign. This effort would be overseen by the communications committee. We would be guided by the communications committee. In addition to their guidance, we would put together a task force of professionals, people that also experts, subject matter experts, educators, health workers, whoever, whatever the communications committee, we would decide the makeup of that task force. And in addition to a task force, more specifically to look at the kinds of messaging to make sure that we have a targeted and sensitive message, as well as an impactful message in this campaign. We would have focus groups made up mostly by Medicaid consumers, and also having include some subject matter experts, people that are familiar with trauma-informed practices in that area in general. As far as the analysis, so we believe that a campaign such as this one is likely to generate awareness that can lead to preventative health behaviors, much as the study participants had. It also has the potential of complementing the integration of the physical and behavioral health. In addition, the campaign is likely to reach populations that are detached from the healthcare system, such as, for a variety of reasons, such as transportation, immigrant status, immigration status, physical mobility, cultural, behavioral health conditions. Also, there's a high probability that it can help destigmatize mental health. Certainly, when we craft the message, we are going to be very mindful, especially with the guidance of the focus groups, people who are likely to be going through these situations. We will make sure that those messages have sensitive and also, again, hopefully help destigmatize seeking behavioral health treatment. So we would also do a plan, do, study, act evaluation at the end of the year to see how things went and to decide what to do for the following year.
That plan, do, study, act concept is an ongoing thing. You do it every time you make a new change.
Well, okay.
So it's not a final evaluation process.
So maybe we're using the wrong terminology.
I mean, when you have your focus groups, that's how you're doing your study. It's a very short, small group concept, so that you don't waste a lot of time on a big thing that's not going to do any good.
So, yeah.
And how are you gonna measure, I guess, I mean, it's tied to, I can think that's why you were saying the PDSA, but, so how are you gonna measure the impact? You know, what are the sort of the measurables, I mean, it's hard, so, I mean, I oversee parking, so I know it's really hard.
I'm trying to give
Kind of
Ruben a
interesting
hard
trying to-
time.
Well, no, really, and that would be very difficult, because, really, no one is doing anything similar in the country. The only place that's doing something similar is Scotland, and they're doing that nationwide. It's a country, it's the entire nation's efforts. And so right now, there's really, it's hard to find someone who's done it before, and that there's a way. I mean, the only thing I can think of is when the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation does their study again, we might be able to see something there. But yeah, that would be very difficult.
I think we'd look to some of our subject matter experts on our committee to help us figure out what can we measure,
Right. We can give a lot of different measuring points at both the beginning and end of some of these events and the different focus groups as well.
So I'm looking at at last month's meeting, one of the discussion points, and we summarized this, where did it go? In the minutes, was we talked about, or the discussion at the board meeting was that a focus could be, rather than talking about ACEs, talk about bringing solutions and a sense of belonging to the community. Did you think about that when you were putting these ideas together? Because I had to remind myself about what the discussion was, that all of our communities are having lots and lots of presentations about ACEs, and what we could do new would be, rather than focus on the trauma, focus on solutions.
Well,
this doesn't feel like.
But that's going to be part of because we're using the ACEs because that is a big driving factor. That is what it's affecting and what's making people sick. So we definitely wouldn't. And this is when we work into the details of the campaign. There would definitely be a very, very strong resiliency aspect to it in the messaging. And that's something that when we get the task force together and put together the campaign, because this proposal here is to for the board to allow the staff to work with the communications committee to put together the plan. Once we put together the plan, there's going to be a strong component of resiliency building and focusing more on solutions like we talked about last time. It wouldn't be just, hey, you're making your kids sick. It wouldn't be this alarmist. It wouldn't be this alarmist message. It would be part of that. And definitely at the end, it will be whatever the task force and the communications committee recommend. But yes, resiliency and solutions would be a very strong driving force.
So, personal experience, the first time I heard about ACEs was an eye-opener. I score pretty high, and I never knew that there was a scoring factor to things. Once I learned that, I was able to actually evaluate myself and see where I have actually done well versus where I haven't done well. And so I can make the decision, a conscious decision, in helping myself do better, right? I think that the people that I've worked with in the past have no clue what this means. And when something is brought to your attention, you can either ignore it or you can do something about it. And if the knowledge isn't even out there, because this is what was happening after I went to my first ACEs seminar or whatever you want to call it. Everybody was walking out of there, wow. And I'm sure that's what you felt like when you were walking out. Because it's not really out there. It's not in the public domain. It is among us because we're getting exposed to this stuff. But out there, people aren't exposed to it. And without that knowledge, how can you do something different? And then when you're coming up from behind and you're implementing something that's positive to support resilience, That means that when you're walking into a doctor's office, there's something there that's going to remind you of resilience. You're here, welcome, let's get well, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, I think my challenge on this is it's kind of a plan to plan. So we're not really, because I think we've already, and I may be incorrect, but I thought we'd already set aside the funding for you to develop a plan. I think we just need, I think we just need to see January before there's anything that, to me, that you would actually need a board approval for. Because I don't know that I don't feel like I need to give you permission to run your program through the communications committee. I think that's just a natural fit, and I could be wrong. And we already have the funding allocated, so I think it's more, do we need to approve a plan to plan? Because we've already kind of approved those things in smaller ways.
Via the budget.
Yeah.
Okay. Other comments?
So, I realize, and I guess as somebody who works in healthcare, the importance of ACEs, obviously, that, but I'm still trying to get, so what is that we're trying to achieve through this media campaign, right? So I think, unfortunately, I think knowledge doesn't always lead to action, actually. There's a lot of, now, I'm on a board and a credit union, and, I went to a conference about behavioral economics and how all these people know stuff, but that doesn't mean they're saving money, that doesn't mean that they're buying insurance, so knowledge, unfortunately, does not lead to change, right? So us as practitioners are using that to try to understand people. So that's different than telling people about ACEs and the public, and then they're like, oh, wow, my dad was an alcoholic, I'm an orphan, wow, so I'm an ACEs, so now I understand myself. I think that's first of all hard to get across in a commercial, 30-second commercial, and I don't know how much that's going to lead people to action. So I'm trying to understand what it is that we're trying to do with that. So is it awareness? Is it change? Is it the behavioral change? Is it? I can't put my finger on it, even though I obviously, like I said, I understand the importance of it, and I think driving change through media is really, really hard. There's a lot of repetition. It has to be simple. It has to be, it's your gut. It has to be, there's a lot. And I think actually, if you guys, it's with one of the Heath brothers, Chip and Dan Heath, they have a book, and one of them talking about how when, I talked to Carol about this example, because the public health in New York City was trying to get people, trying to attack obesity, right? And they're like, well, there's a lot of things that impact obesity, but one of the easy wins is soda pop, right? Pop, right? It's like empty calories. And what they did is they come up with a great ad in the subways where they have something like a Coke, pouring it into a bottle, and it turns into fat, right? And it's just like visceral, and it's like, oh, that's what Coke is, right? It's like, so these are the kinds of things, again, what's the purpose and what kind of things can we come up with to talk to people about that, whatever health we want them to. I love Coke, so I think there's some things that we can do, and I also think that might be important, as expensive as they are, to talk to people that are experts in crafting these documents. And I oversee marketing in my organization. I work with ad agencies and all these people. We do content. We know what we want to get across, but we have other experts help us do that, and it's worth the investment. But you have to have the end goal
very clearly
outlined. What is it that you want the end result to be? Even if you can't measure it, again, measuring is a whole other thing.
So, Ruben.
Similar, hard but not as articulate. I think just perhaps the vehicle, I think it sounds like the whole board is really excited about, moving the needle on this in our region, but perhaps the vehicle may not be as clear, and perhaps the vehicle that we're choosing is not may not be the most, like as an event. How do we get consumers or Medicaid consumers to an event that are, how's that gap going to be bridged? And so I think it'd be good to do a little more brainstorming to see what would be a really good vehicle would be something visual or perhaps kind of something that has more engagement. I find that, like A4H does, they get the kids to teach younger kids about health, and it's really great for the kids that are teaching and not for the kids that are learning it. So I don't know what the best, that's a great vehicle for that, but I guess that's just my comment.
I think it could stratify a bit like the opioid campaign is, where you've got prevention, treatment, recovery, where we break this down into smaller chunks. I mean, I think one thing is just to raise awareness and then direct people to a source. We've all talked about the CSI portal. At some point, that's going to come online, and we can actually put a place in there where we have information about this, including the scoring form, and then also perhaps provide guidance. Okay, if you think this is affecting you, here's the next steps. Go talk to your primary care physician and get more information about this, and then work up a plan with them. And then from there, if there's recovery efforts, we might frame some information about that as well. So I think just a general campaign just to say this is ACEs is obviously just a start.
And certainly we'll leave the experts to do, the crafted messaging and to help us craft the call to action. And the reason when, just as of last night, or as of this morning, I think it was, we were planning on having this on the discussion section, but then we thought, there's a lot more detail to work on this. There's a lot more information. There are a lot more numbers to work out. So maybe we should go to the board and then, get approval to plan for planning. Because there's a lot of more information, such as, what you, Martin and Ruben said, we're not going to be the ones crafting the message because we don't have those expertise. The task force and the focus groups and the experts and the media experts are going to help us do all that. So how do we get Medicaid consumers to attend? We have a lot of partners that we can ask, and they can help us do that as well. So that's why we're asking for permission to plan for planning.
I'm not sure how much time we have, but
Not a lot.
I think the ultimate, big audacious goal is very, very important in terms of what you're trying to accomplish. And I was at a meeting yesterday where they talked about, focusing on, when Yakima focused on gang prevention, then it got identified as a gang problem. And so I think we need to think about, what our real message, our ultimate message is. And if it, we can certainly identify risk factors, but protective factors, and emphasizing, solutions and protective factors is really our ultimate goal. And so how do we do that? Because, and Yakima's been doing a lot of work with ACEs, and honestly, I'm not so sure Yakima is on the right path in regards to how they're managing this. Because, I've been at some meetings where they've talked about some organizations interviewing people when they get hired for work to find out what their ACEs history is.
No.
And I'm just saying that this is, it can go south. It can go south pretty quickly. Because I think you have to manage this really, really carefully.
That's why we're looking at a task force and a focus group.
So, when I read through this, I hear that, there's drop in ED visits. Okay, but I don't understand how that happened. I would want to know how, in the study, what did they determine was the actual variable that contributed?
In answering all those questions and going to doctor's visits, and they would check them. Obviously, the study participants, they were more in depth into all of this, more than the awareness of the public is going to get.
So I would like to suggest, because we are running out of time, that we flesh this out a little bit more again, and keep working on it. Bring it back to the board next month. And I don't know if you've got a group that's working. Is the communications group working on this with you?
We have not yet.
We're going to schedule a meeting.
Because you really don't need board action.
I have a community contact for you, Ruben. For you.
And I'm just going to say that Walla Walla County, Benton Franklin, Yakima, Kittitas, and I don't know about the other counties, have all cut resources within ACEs and from
United Way, like regional effort.
Well, United Way in different parts have been part of that, but it was Benton Franklin Health District led the ACEs here.
Yeah, they had a grant or something. They had two people that were specialized trainers, and they,
Right.
I don't know if it's still there, but yeah, they were doing a good job.
So I would just say, let's look at how we can build on what's already been happening in our communities and not breaking ground zero.
So, can sorry, I know we're late, but I think we gotta be careful because, so let's say you do an ACEs and say, oh, if you have these, it can lead people to believe that there's no hope. So, you have 10 of these, oh, you're doomed. I don't know, I'm serious, right? What do they say? We have 3 or 4, it's really tough to put that out there.
I think that's a good point. There's always unintended consequences.
And I think we've raised that concern in the past already. I just think,
I'm sorry.
It's only the messaging, that's why we're gonna hire experts.
I just feel like what the piece that's been missing is we haven't given Ruben a work group or a committee to help support the fleshing out of the plan and what that would look like.
Yes.
I'm in.
You're in? Okay, nice. So send out a group and get some help.
One more.
Okay, you got Ruben, I don't hit on it. Okay, so let's go on to, the board nominations. And first, I'd like to recognize Sandra Suarez because she has been doing a lot of work with staff, along with the staff, to connect with all of the different sectors and to bring us our slate for 2019. So let me turn it over to Sandra.
Yes, and I'll start by giving most of the credit to the staff because they have done all the work of doing the doodle poll and scheduling and covering some of these calls that I couldn't make. But as you recall, at the beginning of the year, we kind of drew short and long straws as we set up our terms. And so some positions were given the 1-year term and others the 2-year term. For our 1-year first termers, we have 8 positions that were up for renomination or change. So Lauren put together a great little spreadsheet that kind of gives you an overview of the different meetings that we've had in the last month to get to this slate of candidates. We have a lot of familiar faces that have been reelected by their sectors. So if you'll recall, as our past history and practice, we've allowed sectors to elect their representatives versus us having to draw a name and facing the backlash of that. What that would look like. Because of course there would be, but this way we put it all on the sectors. And so you can see we have a lot of returning faces. Brian was reelected by the healthcare provider sector. Martha Landman was elected by the public health, and she would replace Megan DeVolk as a representative. The MCOs have their own process and each serve 1-year terms, and so it is Jorge's term to join us at the table for the 2019 year. Les was re-elected by his Education Council, Madeline by the Transportation Council. Social Services was previously represented by Lori Brown, and she expressed an interest not to continue in that role, and so that group selected Susan Grindle. We had a little bit of a challenge with the behavioral health work group sector. We had, as you see, we didn't have a very large turnout for the call, and we had 2 candidates nominated, one Dana Otis from Lourdes and Ed Thornberg, who currently fills that position, and we sent out an email to the entire sector so that they could actually vote, since the vote, we had exactly 6 members and the votes were 50-50. Did we get the results of that, Lauren?
We did. So the results were, there were 7 votes for Dana Otis and 6 votes for Ed on the doodle poll.
Actually, you need to acknowledge that either Barbara or Ronnie need to withdraw their vote as they're both Lourdes employees. I don't think it changes the outcome, so I think it was actually 7-5.
Alrighty. Yes,
they're acknowledging that they did, Ed.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Yeah, and with the funding on it too, since we have theirs done. Okay.
And your documentation should reflect that Barbara nominated Dana.
Okay, that's fine. So we're still at 7-6 with Dana as the elected rep.
Okay, and then for local government, Ruben was unanimously elected.
Actually, it's five.
You're a cricket.
Nominated to continue in his role because, well, no one else. If you'll recall, we had a lot of struggles finding a local government member who is willing to serve. So
You shouldn't say that we had a lot of trouble, because I didn't tell Ruben that, so.
But we appreciate his commitment to the organization and setting an example of what local government and how local government can represent their communities in a lot of various factors, such as the ACH. So that is our slate of candidates who are up for approval. I'll attack John separately.
Well, let's do the slate first, and then we'll go to the office.
Okay.
And you're not going to attack anybody.
Yeah, I might. You never know.
What is our responsibility as far as looking at qualifications when we're approving board members?
So qualifications, so that would have been the responsibility of the nominating committee and the sector, because the recommendations came from the sector.
Right.
I just, because if we, and I just want to know about my responsibility, because if we're just doing it for the sectors, then why am I even worried about a responsibility? I'm not I just want to make sure I'm performing my duty, or we're performing our duties when we're accepting this.
Do that, so I'm going to pull up the bylaws.
Sorry, I just.
No, that's okay. You asked really good questions.
So we sent out the bylaws and the sector policy along with all of the appointment requests, and so we reviewed those. I know that you weren't able to make the education sector meeting.
I tried to get on, but I couldn't speak, so I got off because I didn't feel like it was nice to just listen.
So we have to do this like really quick or postpone because we need this room for another meeting.
Oh, okay.
So, can you accept that the nominating committee did their due diligence?
Yeah, I can. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't something I was supposed to do this night. Yeah.
Okay, so the nominating committee has made their nomination. All in favor? Would somebody make a motion to accept the nomination?
I make the motion to accept the nomination.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
No, you should have made it, but
yeah.
You make it. Will you second it?
Sure.
There we go.
Thank you.
There we go.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Okay, that passes. And do you have a slate of officers?
We do have a slate of officers, and you'll again see some returning faces. The nominating committee met, and we would like to retain Rhonda in place as chair. Martha Landman, we thought would make a great representative for in the vice chair position, and she would provide a much needed smaller region representation and district representation from areas that really often get overlooked and overpassed for representation on the board sometimes from our smaller counties. And as treasurer and chair-elect, we have selected Brian. And as secretary, Madeline graciously agreed that she would like to continue in that position as well. So that is our slate of officers.
Are there any questions about the slate of officers? Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
So moved. Second.
Second by Dan. Are there any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Okay. That is done. We have an executive session?
Yeah.
Where we need to do that somewhere else.
Okay.
Is there another location that we can have a brief executive? Okay. So for those, yeah, we'll need to do that. All right, so executive session for board members. Martine is going to find us a location. And everybody else have a Merry Happy Holiday. You
Board members stay.
Yes, board members stay.
All board members, Happy New Year.
It could be the executive committee.